about the moral argument when we address the problem of evil. Now, it is because the problem of evil is a kind of argument against God. It is the atheists claim that the data about evil seems to be incompatible with the existence of God, or somehow they are evidence against God's existence. Now, we have talked about this problem before in an earlier apologetics conference, but then my colleagues are going to talk about more the Christian understanding of various aspects of evil. Now, but the relevance of the moral argument is that if there is evil, there is also good. So if the problem of evil is a problem for theists, then the problem of good may also be a problem for atheists, because when you say that there are objective evil, it means that there are objective moral considerations or objective moral standards which make something good or evil. Now, if we can further argue that the existence of this kind of moral objectivity is more likely to be explained or can be better explained by God, and then these kind of objective moral standards would be very difficult to understand or explain in an atheistic universe, then we can also say that the general phenomena about morality will also count for God. Now, so even if the problem of evil cannot be entirely dissolved, then if this moral argument is convincing, then we can, from the data of morality, find an argument to balance the problem of evil. So I think apart from the apologetic purpose, the moral argument can be used to address the problem of evil in this way. But first of all, there are many types of moral argument. For example, there is a famous Kantian moral argument. Many people, if you study philosophy, remember Kant as a kind of philosopher who denies natural theology. He criticizes the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, etc. But many people forget that, in fact, Kant also argues for God. He thinks that we cannot start from the data of the universe. Of course, I do not agree with Kant here, but Kant also thinks that we can start with the phenomena about morality and then argue to the existence of God. And that is because morality requires a kind of highest good or summum bonum, which means that the happiness should be proportional to virtue. It means that good should be rewarded, the really good people should be happy in the end, and the evil people should suffer or should be miserable in the end. But if the world is like the atheists talk about it, our lives and the world will finish after our death, we will have no longer any experience after our death, then from the data of his human history, we can see that this is not true. A lot of people have been miserable, and a lot of evil people have prospered and enjoyed their life without punishment. Now, so in an atheist world, this moral ideal of happiness being proportional to virtue cannot exist. And then Kant uses a further analysis to show that only if there is immortality and only if there is a God who can control both the moral law and also the natural laws can achieve this kind of harmony. Now, so our moral ideal would require the existence of God. So that is one kind of moral argument. But I have no time to talk about it today. And then I'll focus on this kind of argument, which is a moral argument from the objectivity of the moral law. Now, there are several premises for this argument. Objective moral law exists, and they can't exist unless they have a basis in reality. Okay, only God's mind can be the basis of moral laws. Neither the material world nor social conventions can provide the basis. Therefore, God exists. Now, if we believe that there is something objectively wrong, for example, torturing innocent people or killing a lot of young kids for no reason at all is wrong, or if you believe that Hitler massacring a lot of Jews and Polish people, etc., is an evil person, and Mother Teresa, who helps a lot of people unconditionally, is a better person, at least a better person than Hitler, then you believe that there are objective distinctions in reality, not only in your mind. We believe that even if somebody thinks that Hitler is a better person than Teresa, we will say his judgment is wrong. It's not true that Hitler is a better person than Mother Teresa. Now, so if there are such standards which are independent of our opinion, then it means that objective moral laws exist. Now, but of course, there are moral relativists who would want to deny the existence of objective moral laws. I'll come to that and defend the premise A here. Now, but if there are some moral laws, if they have reality, then they must be real in terms of reality. That is, you have to provide a basis in the reality for the objective moral laws. Otherwise, if it depends just on the taste of people, or it depends on just some contingent historical facts, then they are relative and they cannot be objective. Now, I'll argue later on that, in fact, we cannot provide a convincing or satisfactory explanations of the objective existence of moral laws apart from the mind of God. So that means that we have to believe that God exists if we believe that objective moral laws exist. Now, there can be further more experience, more arguments. For example, we can argue from our moral experiences, but the shortage of time forbids me to go on here. And I'll now elaborate the argument from the objectivity of the moral law. Okay. Now, first of all, the structure of this argument. The one premise is the assertion that some moral standards are objective and correct. Now, mind you, for this argument to go to proceed, we only need to believe that some moral standards are objective. Now, of course, some alleged moral standards may be subjective. Some standards may be relative to some historical circumstances, but we believe that moral standards are not entirely like this. At least there are some basic values. For example, cruelty is bad, benevolence is good, so on and so forth. Killing an innocent people is wrong. Okay, now, so we only believe that there are some moral standards. Now, to deny that, you have to be a complete moral relativist or nihilist. That is, you have to say that all moral standards are subjective, and then that is very costly, and that is quite contrary to our moral experiences and also our moral practices, and also the practices of law and society, etc. Now, and then basically, I would say that if there are more objective moral standards, then either we give a naturalistic explanation, that is, we appeal to facts about the natural or material world to explain the existence of objective moral laws. But if naturalistic explanations are not satisfactory, then we can try religious explanations. Now, religious explanations may include theistic explanations or non-theistic explanations. Now, for example, in Chinese culture, some believe in a kind of Tao or Tao, which is a kind of eternal principle, which contains some moral standards. Now, but some Chinese scholars do not believe that the Chinese Tao is a personal God. Now, similarly, in the Indian traditions, some people believe in the law of karma. They think that the law of karma will punish people according to their moral virtues or vices, and they are objective and they exist. And if you are not punished in this life, then you will be punished in your end of life, in your reincarnation. Now, concerning this problem, I'll leave Dominic to talk about it. So mainly, for my part, I will try to argue that if there are more objective moral standards, then naturalistic explanations are not good at all. So we have to appeal to some religious explanations. And of course, the existence of God, the moral laws based on God's loving and benevolent nature and so on, can explain clearly the origin of moral laws and the objectivity of moral laws, and also how the moral laws can be used to judge people and punish people if there are some evil person violating the moral laws. Okay, and then if the naturalist explanations are not good and the theistic explanation is good, then the theistic explanation should be deemed the correct truth. And then if we argue further that the non-theistic explanation among the religions is not as good as a theistic explanation, then we can say that theism, or the existence of God, is the best explanation of objective moral laws. So then that arrives at our conclusion of the moral argument. Now, I'll due to shortage of time, I'll skip some slides. Now, I'll go directly to the evaluation of premise A, which is about the objectivity of morals. Now, first of all, some people would not grant premise A. To defeat the moral argument, some naturalists or some atheists are ready to deny the objectivity of moral. So they go the way of moral relativism or nihilism. And they think that they are reasonable because they think there are some good arguments for relativism. And usually the popular arguments for relativism are several. First is the argument for moral diversity. They point out that the moral judgments are widely divergent in different societies, and they think that since people have different ideas about moral judgments, so the moral standards must be relative. So that is an argument from moral diversity. And secondly, there's an argument for tolerance. They think that if you believe in objective morals, objective good and objective evil, then you would impose your ideas of good and evil on other people, and that would lead to intolerance. So that is their understanding of moral objectivism, but intolerance is bad. So if moral objectivism leads to such a bad result, then we have to reject moral objectivism. So moral relativism has to be true. So that is the second argument for moral relativism, and that is the argument from tolerance. And then there are the third argument, the argument from moral dilemmas. They think that no moral rule is absolute because it always leads to moral dilemmas. Libel, ethics, white lies. For example, if you think that killing is absolutely wrong, but sometimes in the case of a war, you have to defend your family and country, then you may be forced to kill people. And maybe the moral rule has to be broken in some moral dilemma. So they think that there are no objective moral rules, so moral objectivism is false. So these are the three main arguments for moral relativism. Now, of course, the topic is big. In this morning's talk, I can only scratch the surface, just introduce you to this argument, and you can follow up this topic in more books. Now, but I think these three arguments against moral objectivity are not very good. Now, because the existence of diversity in terms of human opinions does not entail the relativity of the standards. Now, for example, whether there exists extraterrestrial life, ETs, is a controversial question. Some scientists deny the existence of ETs, and others believe in ETs due to, say, UFOs, etc. We have also covered this. Some people have there was a previous talk about UFOs, etc. Now, but anyway, although reasonable people may disagree over the existence of ETs, but you can recognize that the existence of ET itself is an objective question. Either there exists some extraterrestrial intelligence or there isn't any. So even if human opinions diverge, it does not mean that there is no objective answer. Now, so we need to distinguish descriptive relativism and normative relativism. Descriptive relativism means that if we just use the sociological method to describe the moral standards in different cultures, they may differ a lot. Now, but that does not mean that the standards have to differ among themselves. Now, if there are some conflict, it is still very possible that some sides may be wrong and the other side may be correct. Now, so the existence of divergent opinions in itself does not show that the standards are relative. I think there is a kind of misunderstanding of the nature of this disagreement. Now, and then in fact, if we look at many major civilizations and many societies, although there are some moral standards which vary a lot, we can also see that, in fact, there is also a lot of consensus about the major values or the major moral principles. Say, killing innocent people is wrong, love your family members is good, so on and so forth. Say in India, in China, or in the West. Now, so I think the divergence of moral opinions in itself has been exaggerated. And then the second argument, I can only deal with it very briefly. This argument for relativism is just confusing, because if you say that moral objectivism leading to intolerance, so moral objectivism has to be rejected, this argument already presupposes that tolerance is an objective value. Otherwise, there's no reason to do so. Now, so to argue against moral objectivism, this argument already presupposes the objective value of tolerance. So this argument itself is a self-contradiction. So there's no reason to accept such a self-contradictory argument. Now, and then the existence of moral dilemmas themselves can be dealt with by having the idea of prima facie duty. Now, although killing, the prohibition of killing may not be absolute, but the only exceptions are when you have other moral commands, for example, to defend your country and family. So that's why sometimes killing in a just war is justifiable or acceptable. Now, so if we say that you just kill people for fun, you do not want to save your country, you just kill people because you are happy. You feel happy about that. Is any sane mind saying that killing people just for fun or torturing people just for fun is correct? Now, so even if there are moral dilemmas, we can still describe many moral situations when we can see that some moral judgment exists. So that is enough for the existence of objective moral standards. Now, in a way, we can use all other things equal clause to express the idea of the moral objectivity. For example, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, it is morally better not to murder than to murder. I think there would not be many people who would disagree with that. Ceteris paribus, it is morally better not to lie than to lie. Now, so although there may not be absolute moral rules, it does not mean that there are no objective moral judgment. Many people have confused the two things. Now, and then, so if the arguments for moral relativism is not cogent, then are there good reasons to reject moral relativism? I think there is, because in our practice, and in fact, I think by appeal to our moral intuitions, when we look at our lives, rarely can we find a person who can really refrain from all moral judgments. Okay, now so moral relativism is hardly a livable option, and then in fact in our lives we have strong moral intuitions like to murder innocent people just for fun is wrong, so on and so forth. Now, if you want to deny all these moral intuitions, I think it is reasonable to deny, depend on our intuitions. I do not think there is any reason to reject that. And it is these kind of moral beliefs are so, I think, grounded in our history and our life that I think unless you have good reasons to reject them, it is much more reasonable to accept at least there are some such moral judgment than to deny them. Okay, now and then I go on to discuss if there are more objective moral standards, as the premise A says, then can we provide good naturalistic explanations about that? Now, as I have said, to explain some objective things, you have to ground it in the reality. Now, so for the naturalist, if they want to explain moral objectivity, they can only appeal to their reality, which may include A, non-human nature, B, human individuals, either the emotions or reason, C, human society. Now, but it would be difficult for non-human nature to provide objective foundation for morality, because as a naturalist conceive the natural world, the world consists of, say, atoms and electrons, quarks, or electric fields, magnetic fields, etc. Now, in the formulas describing all these forces and matter, there may be considerations of space, distance, velocity, etc. But there's no good or bad. These objective things are not moved by moral considerations, according to the naturalist. So it would be very difficult to say that we can find objective moral standards in this non-human nature. Now, I can only cut a long story short. Some philosophers have tried to argue otherwise by giving a very sophisticated analysis of good in terms of, say, benefits to human beings, etc. But I do not think any such attempts really succeed. So the planets go around the sun according to the law of gravitation, regardless whether it is good or bad for human beings or for other life, etc. If we use imitation of nature as a fundamental moral principle, then should we imitate a high degree of cooperation with the ants community or the survival of the fittest principle prevailing in the jungle? Now, because, for example, the Taoists say that we should imitate nature, but nature is ambiguous morally. Or we can see that there are some species like ants which cooperate with one another. They seem to love one another. But there are also the spiders which devour their partners after mating. So if we imitate, which should we imitate? So when we decide to imitate the cooperating ants, we are already presupposing some moral standards. And sociobiology tries to show that human beings have moral standards because the existence of moral standards would be beneficial to the survival of the human species. Now, but that is taking a different problem. The sociobiology or the evolutionary psychology may explain, I do not think they have very good explanations, but they may explain why moral beliefs exist in human society. But if the existence of moral standards is just a kind of tool to promote human survival in some historical circumstances, then these moral standards may become outdated and they cannot be objective across time and space. Now, so In fact, if morality just exists for human survival, then if a human individual finds it very inconvenient for his survival, then if it is reasonable in this sense, then he may also reject moral standards. There is no objective reason why a human individual has to respect the moral law if he can see through it. Because moral standards just exist. It's a kind of biological adaptation. They come to exist because they help humans survive. But I find moral standards inconvenient for my survival. So for the same reason, I can also reject moral standards. Now, so in fact, Michael Ruse, a kind of evolutionarist naturalist, he says morality is a biological adaptation, no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Now, but if that is so, then the objectivity of moral standards is a kind of illusion. It helps the society survive, but Ruse is candid about this. He says, I appreciate that when somebody says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they're referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Michael Ruse, an evolutionist, says so. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. So that is a logical consequence of a naturalist view, which depends on evolutionary psychology or similar arguments. Now, if you argue that objective moral standards are dependent on human individuals, then it is very difficult to explain why it is objective. Because if you say human reason will prove moral standards, I will tell you this is very difficult. And you may prove moral standards are useful in some circumstances, but it is very difficult to prove that they can be objective, regardless of individual taste or circumstances. Now, and then if you rely on the human emotions, for example, David Hume, he thinks that morality is founded in human sympathy. But of course, many people have sympathy for some victims, etc. But still, there are also many individuals who are callous, cruel, or even sadistic. There are serial killers who can feel nothing. So I produce some news in Hong Kong and in China maybe, which talks about many real cases like this pathological sociopath serial killer. Okay, but I think every society has these people. And in fact, most people, although they are sympathetic, in some circumstances, they can also be violent. They can also be abusive. Now, so there is no solid foundation in human nature to grant the objective requirements of morality. Okay. Now, so I think there's some naturalists try to appeal to a social contract theory. They think that objective moral standards result from a kind of agreement between people. They seem to having a contract with one another. This contract is like this. For example, A and B sit down around a table and say, okay, now if we fight one another endlessly, then that would be detrimental to both of us. So let us agree to some shared moral standards. Let us help one another. Let us not be violent towards one another, so on and so forth. This will be good for us. Now, so the social contract theory argued that it is rational for all the people in a society to make a social contract to follow moral rules because reciprocity, I helping you, you helping me, will be best for everyone. Now, so in this sense, they say morality is objective. Now, but there are 5 major reasons why this kind of social contract theory cannot really convincingly explain morality. Now, because this kind of social contract theory presupposes that there is human cooperation, but if everyone follows morality, then to be moral would be beneficial to yourself. So being concerned about your own self welfare, it is rational to obey morality. Now, but in many real cases, the society is immoral. There are a lot of cruelties, corruption, bribery, etc. In such a society, to have integrity, to be moral, will be very costly. Now, so this kind of presupposition does not really obtain in many societies. So this social contract theory cannot be applied to this kind of society, which is quite widespread. And then there's the second problem of the free rider. If the majority of people in a society are following morality conscientiously, one can gain maximum benefits by violating the moral demands when not likely to be detected and punished. This is a free rider. So everyone is moral, and then you can be sneaky. You can cheat other people when they cannot detect that, but so you still appear to others to be very moral, but you can take advantage of others whenever possible. So there is a moral free rider. And according to this reasoning of social contract, this free rider is in fact quite reasonable to do so, because to agree on a social contract from the very beginning just to protect yourself, if you can protect yourself as well as gaining a lot of advantage, that would be a reasonable option to do. But of course, that is against morality. But the social contract theory would justify the free riders. So that is a mistake for the social contract theory. And then the social contract theory also presupposes that people need to be reciprocal. But if in some circumstances, there are some strong people, there are some tyrants like Mao Zedong, who possesses so much power that it does not need to look at the responses of other people. So in that case, there is no reason for Mao Zedong or Stalin to make a social contract with other people. They can just abuse their power to kill other people, to strengthen their tyranny, so on and so forth. But this consequence is not really moral. But that is a consequence if the reasoning of the social contract theory is correct. Now, and then we also see that morality requires us to help people who cannot reciprocate, like the poor, like the animals. But the social contract depends on reciprocity. So the social contract theory cannot explain all these moral demands. And lastly, social contract theory depends on the balance of interest. But if if the existence of morality is helpful, but I think that is not enough to justify to sacrifice your life. But we can see that in human history, morality, in fact, requires many people to sacrifice their life just to help other people for their family, like a fireman, or sacrificing for the potential victims in a building, in a fire, etc. So the social contract theory will not justify all these really low moral demands. Now, so I think I'll stop here. The point is that objective moral standards exist. That is a more reasonable conclusion. And then naturalistic theories cannot really explain the existence of moral standards. But what about some non-theistic, non-personal religious explanations? I'll leave it to Dominic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwan, Professor Kwan, for sharing with us. Yeah, he has presented various views and objections to the notion of moral objectivity, and he has countered them very successfully. As you can see, Dr. Kwan was presenting, and he